Hi there, Reject Nation. I'm Greg Alba.
And I'm John Humphrey.
We are testing out these microphones today for this special video podcast we are going to do. If the mics don't work, we have a backup mic. So let's hope these microphones are working, or else we're pointlessly talking into them right now the entire time. Yeah.
Enjoy these eyesores.
Yeah. I mean, we could readjust it, but I don't know. I feel like limited in movement.
You need a box right in front of your chest.
Just so we can just move around as much as we want, not lose the sound. Podcast audio. Oh, I just talk super deep in here.
Doesn't matter what I do with my body.
So one of our top award tiers on Patreon is, it's nice to have mics. We never had mics.
It's different, right?
All these years we haven't had mics.
I know. It makes you feel different. It makes you feel more important to have a microphone of your own.
And one of our top award tiers on Patreon is whatever video you request, we must definitely do and put up on YouTube. And today comes from a man named Michael B., who has a YouTube channel called Omni One Media. And he has a great request here, which John and I have not made any notes for. We were just hoping the microphones would give us, the energy to riff.
Yeah, man.
Sometimes
a new toy is all you need to be inspired.
Why make notes in prep when you have microphones that just get you the energy? I'm yelling at the mic.
Beard's weird.
Freaking beard's weird. So, yeah, his question, 2 minutes into this, is, so for the topic, with Game of Thrones coming to an end and the spin-offs being announced in the works, when do you think a network or studio should let something end rather than continue to milk it? Examples, Breaking Bad, Harry Potter, Star Wars. When do you feel like it's earned or necessary versus just abusing it? Well, I mean, for me, the one little note that sort of popped into my mind when I was thinking about this question, as I sound important talking into the microphone. Half of this podcast is going to be about us having microphones.
Just commenting on how great it feels, how new it is.
I feel like a main issue that happens with franchises, especially with the corporate world that we have in the entertainment industry, is we don't know how to end things on a high note. We have this thing where if it keeps making money, we're just going to keep making more of them. That's plain and simple. And if they start to lose profit, well, how much profit did it lose? Could we just, bring down the budget a little bit and then make another one? Like with the Pirates movies, they want to reboot them. Like for me, that's a scenario where I'm like, you should just let that end at least for a while. Don't just reboot it now.
Let it end for long enough that when you really decide to reboot it, we're like, oh yeah, Pirates. I haven't thought about that in a while.
Or like, oh, Johnny Depp is definitely way too old to do that now.
Yeah, we have to replace him with somebody.
Oh, this is a nice test. See, there's a car horn honking outside, and normally when we have just the directional mic we're filming off of, it's a real bother. I mean, it's still distracting to us, but hopefully the microphones aren't picking it up.
So you'll only get it from the top mic.
Yeah, and I don't think we're using that top mic.
Yeah, so with any luck, you won't know at all, other than the fact that we pointed it out.
So yeah, I think the thing is, like, there are better examples, I think, of truly ending on a high note. Like I think the Dark Knight trilogy comes to mind, despite what you might think of the Dark Knight Rises. One thing I really admire about the way that was handled was, no, it's done. It's over. Sure, Dark Knight Rises made well over $1 billion. It was a very successful film. They could make more. It's not like they're low on Batman villains. It's not like Christian Bale is too old. Even now, I'm like, if Christian Bale, you still do it.
He wanted to, sure.
They could have continued it, but that was a good example of putting your foot down and going, no, I told the story I wanted to tell. And I feel like a lot of the times with these franchises, we overly milk them, and sometimes it's not a bother. I feel like you can keep, like, the Bond franchise seems to be one that every time you think it's dead, they come out with a new one that's just like, oh, that was excellent. Yes.
Well, I feel like part of the allure of Bond in a weird way is the fact that it is such a vast franchise with so many stories and so many different iterations of the character. And that's something too that you don't get as often as like, oh, we're going to recast him and that keeps it fresh,
But then, I think for me, I think expansion in different mediums is a little cooler than, just like if we were announced more Lord of the Rings movies, I'd be like, oh, just stop.
We did this with The Hobbit,
yeah,
and I wasn't about it.
Let it end, just let it end. But I think an exploration of more of Middle Earth and the additional stories to sort of riff off of that J.R.R. Tolkien put down, or even with The Hobbit, I admired the effort to include characters that weren't in The Hobbit, or develop new characters. I liked that. In the concept of it more than I did the execution. So I think with a TV show, that gets me excited, especially with how TV and streaming, the money that's being put down, you get some high quality production that it doesn't make me go, they're going to be able to pull this off and make it like, to me, I go, yeah, they probably have the money to do it now. They have the way they do TV. I think that's cooler as opposed to, like, do we need another Alien movie? Do we need another Predator movie? But even with Alien, I heard that what they're doing is they're having fan films be submitted, something along the lines of like people can submit fan films. They have a lot of submissions, and somehow that gets linked to canon in some way. Which I think is cool to have like a vote for that. Like that's a different type of expansion as opposed to, damn, Ridley Scott, please stop making these movies, And
it's a different kind of fan service, too,
exactly.
that I think is a lot more constructive than a lot of the fan service we see, and that contributes to kind of the underlying factor of this question. Because, especially in the nostalgic time, I feel like this is a particular conundrum because so many things get kept alive and perpetuated simply because they were great once. We still remember that greatness, and we just don't want to let them go. And so I feel like, for something like Alien especially, where the past couple films haven't scratched that itch for everybody. Something
it's
like
not,
this.
Not even past couple. It's like past
everything
like 5.
Past 2. Yeah. Anything past Aliens, nobody agrees about. So it starts to feel like we're always excited about the prospect of Alien, but it doesn't seem like they quite know what to do. And so and that was something that came to me when I saw that Star Wars fan film back in December. Was I finally started to get it, because as much as I don't love the bickering about Star Wars, the franchise under Disney, and what their creatives are doing with it, I saw that film and I was like, okay, this is something that was made by fans that clearly has a voice rooted in the source material, but that has its own thing to do and say, and that could be an exciting new frontier and a breaking down of the barrier between people and, movie studios.
Yeah. I mean, Michael B. listed Breaking Bad here because they are making the movie, which will focus on Jesse Pinkman.
And they made the Colombian remake.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. So they're doing that. And see, to me, I'm like, okay, that I'm not opposed to. If they said we're going to do a Walter White movie, like, oh, somehow he's not dead, then that to me would fall under the line of you're abusing this franchise.
Yeah. Unless you make it some quiet indie movie about him going back home and trying to mend things. It's like if you had him out drug dealing again, it would just feel like totally rote.
I think what like the cleverness behind what Breaking Bad has done is they did more than just one great character,
And they had an end game in mind from the start, from what I've been told.
We're
they
in
knew
the
exactly.
end game now. Now that we have mics, I can say it in the baritone of
we're in the end game now.
We're in the end game now.
And now Marvel just like anytime anybody says the word end game, we're all going to think of this one specific thing.
I'm trying to include we're in an Infinity War now. As often as possible.
That's got a ring to it.
Well, you see, like what Marvel has done is one of the most impressive things in the world, they've what Bond has established over the course of many decades, they've established in one.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
with slightly less variation in quality.
and serial format too, as opposed to you can kind of just hop into a Bond movie
you can
usually.
pick and choose almost anyone
Yeah.
except Quantum of Solace.
Yeah, and I'd also say for what was the second? Was the second one Goldfinger? The second one, the one that was right after Doctor No, was pretty much a direct sequel to Doctor No for the most part. So yeah, I think, and then you never know. Like Walking Dead, it's weird to me what's happened with that show because there was a point where I'm like, man, you should have ended this, and then there was like seasons, just seasons where like, why is it still on the air? This is so boring. I have never actively quit a show the way I quit Walking Dead.
Well, it seemed like for a while, even the people still watching it would
like,
talk about it the way you talk about like your family member who you have a really troubled relationship with, but they're your family, so you stick by them.
Yeah, but then now I'm hearing after Rick left, the show's like apparently amazing now.
Yeah, they
like,
finally got a new showrunner.
Everyone's saying that. Like, it's amazing now. I personally still feel like, you see, like that it lends itself to a world of exploration, though. That's the thing. If your franchise doesn't lend itself to that kind of world, then you got to know how to end it on a high note. It's like the Rocky franchise is fucking bizarre to me, even though I love those. Like, there's yet to be a Rocky. Like, I don't really care for Rocky 5, but even stuff like that I kind of like. But there's yet to be a Rocky film where I hate that movie. You know, Creed movies included in that franchise. But that's a franchise too, where like every single time you're like, man, when's this gonna end? Should they end this by now?
You would think.
But then they still deliver high quality content. It's pretty crazy to me.
Well, and I feel like that is a franchise that has the benefit of expanding and playing out over much time, whereas nowadays the pressure is, okay, we got to franchise this immediately. We got to have a new film out in 2 years or something like that. Whereas the Rocky films, especially as they crested into Creed and stuff like that, feel like they've kind of followed a natural trajectory.
Well, yeah, they found their formula. And the thing is, like, it also depends on the standard of writing that we want from our movies. You know, like, when I see the Toy Story 4 trailer, it doesn't look like a bad movie. It looks like a good Pixar movie. The thing is, I'm like, I've seen all these things explored before, though. Like everything they're advertising, at least. You know, I can't
what is fresh here?
I can't talk about the film itself. To me, right now, Toy Story 4 looks like the only best comparison I could make off the top of my head is Jason Bourne. I'm like, because like Jason Bourne to me was, this is the Bourne formula, and they did it, but because I've seen this done before already, it's already been explored perfectly in a trilogy format. This is kind of just okay now.
Feels kind of inconsequential to the overall picture.
Yeah, like and I feel like fans have overall responded that way to it because there's no talk about a Bourne 5, you know.
Yeah, well,
and they set up for a Bourne 5 in that movie, you know.
Oh yeah, well that's the thing too now, is that every movie, we're in a weird time now where it seems like everything wants to hint at the possibility of being a franchise and continuing, and that's something that I do remember from being younger, is that movies would just end and then maybe you got a sequel later, and I feel like we're figuring that out, which is a good thing. But I think when you're talking about when it's time to end something versus when it's time to keep it going, I feel like you really have to look at the spirit of it, like what is it about, what's it trying to say, and what do people like about it, and is that worth keeping going beyond just the fact that it's recognizable and profitable?
Yeah, because like the weird thing about the Prometheus concept excited me, because the thing about the Alien franchise, more than Predator, even though Predator does have its own mythology and world to build off of, the thing about the Alien franchise, the movies, I'm not talking about comics or books, but the movies themselves, it's established a whole world. There's a whole universe out there. It's in the future, but it's all tied to this one nasty, slimy creature.
Yeah.
And So you can't really do much outside of that, even though you got this whole world going on. So Prometheus excited me because that was at the time where you could take out the fucking xenomorph, and then you could explore, like, well, if you take out the xenomorph, there's this whole world to explore in the future here.
Yeah.
And then they don't commit to that. And I feel like a lot of the times with these franchise movies, using Alien as an example, is they're bogged down by nostalgia factor. They're bogged down by what worked in the beginning, and they're trying to include that in some fashion.
Especially with Prometheus, because the thing
Yeah.
that drove me up a wall about that movie was that they kept. I mean, Ridley Scott had this whole plan laid out in several interviews about, oh, this is going to be a bunch of movies. Eventually, it's going to dovetail into Alien, but that's not our focus right now. We want to explore a whole new side of the world. And for me, the prospect of that was really cool because I was like, okay, here's something that is built out of the side of a familiar universe, but that doesn't have to rely on just that stuff that we love from that original universe. And then you go watch Prometheus, and I feel like the alien itself is almost a proverbial chest burster for that movie because it's just forced in there.
Yeah.
And it kind of undoes. It's like I came into that movie because I was like, oh, cool, we're going to have a mystery now, and we're going to expand this world and see some new things. And ultimately, they just didn't deliver on that principle.
And then there are also franchises like Die Hard, where it's so heavily reliant on Bruce Willis. That's the thing. That franchise relies heavily, beyond the character of John McClane, Bruce Willis in the role of John McClane.
Oh, well, yeah, because John McClane is Bruce Willis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're at a point with Bruce Willis where he just don't give a fuck about anything, he doesn't. And they're still making that weird prequel Die Hard movie / sequel Die Hard movie, where it's supposed to be, you see John McClane before the events of Die Hard 1, which minimizes the effect of Die Hard 1 when you're just a regular cop who's in this like crazy terrorist situation. So to me, I'm like, that's a franchise that should just, it's called Die Hard. Ha ha ha. Yeah, it should die. The franchise should just end. Because your main character, you'll never find another person to replace it. The gimmick of, like, okay, first he's in a building, now he's on a plane. Then you get
as a black friend.
As much as I like Live Free or Die Hard for its cheesiness and overall fun, it's not anywhere near on par with the first movie, and none of them have been. I mean, Die Hard with a Vengeance is all right, actually, in my opinion. But
I enjoy the first three, to be honest.
Yeah, the first three they're fun, but
the first one is the great one.
Yeah, that's the great one. But then you get to part 5, and I'm like, guys, Bruce Willis ain't gonna change. And the other thing is, there's nothing more you can do with the franchise. There's literally nothing you can do that wouldn't further ruin it. And same thing with like the Predator. When I think of that franchise, you got a whole world you can explore there with the Predators. The thing is like, do we really want to see these creatures speaking in some made up language with a bunch of weird ass subtitles? Like, because they even make their subtitles weird. And like, what can you really explore? There's nothing left to. It's the kind of thing where it's like, you think you have a world at your disposal or something to explore, but what you're done though. You're done with your story.
Well, yeah, it's like, how many different movies and stories can you truly make out of this? And on the opposite side, if you take Predator as the example, is it acceptable? Is it what we demand of Predator each time, that it just be a new scenario of characters fighting predators, and it's immediate, and it's kind of like a slasher movie, and that's it? Or do we want to keep? It's like every Predator movie lately has had this attempt at some kind of grander mythology. If you look at Predators, it was like, oh no, they're coming to help us, and it's getting more and more convoluted and hard to stomach the more they try and add story points to this thing that used to just be immediate and scary and mysterious. You know?
And then a lot of times the mythological expansion ruins your franchise. It ruins your movie.
Well, and going back to the idea of prequels too, it's like, you got this Die Hard prequel, and I'm sitting here thinking that it kind of diminishes. I mean, every movie will exist on its own isolated plane, but after a while, especially with a character like that, I'm like, nobody is special all the time, all of their life. And part of the magic of checking in with one of these stories is this is the extraordinary event in John McClane's life, or one of a handful. But if his life is just all extraordinary events like this, at a certain point, it just starts to lose its effect. You know, it starts to become just about, okay, well, how inventive were your stunts this time? You know?
Yeah, and I also like with Jurassic Park. That's another franchise where like that. As cool as the ending of Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom was, in some ways, what they tease with that ending of Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, of what Part 3 could be. Literally, you're even when the franchise starts, like I like Jurassic World 1. I think it's like so silly and knows what it is, but you do get to the point where these films where I'm like you're working too much within the same box all the time, and that's why I started off this talk with a lot of times what gets me excited is when you change mediums, because that's when you offer room for, like, honestly with movies. It's harder to do the expansion because you got to like repeat shit from the past movies in order to satisfy
and try and play to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And where as opposed to a show, you can really expand. Like I've heard they're finally doing this, but I've said for many years, I'm like, if you wanted to do expand on the Bourne franchise, you should do a Treadstone series. That I've always said that, and I think recently it was announced they're going to do that, and I'm like, well, about time, because that's the way you continue it. Not fucking slap Jeremy Renner in there and call Bourne Legacy, or not do Bourne 4, which is exactly what we've seen a billion times already.
Yeah, it's like what's there new to bring to this iteration?
Yeah, I'm like, dude, oftentimes the best way to do it is change the medium, and I feel like shows have a better chance of more solid longevity, but shows have suffer from the same problem too.
Anything can go on too long and lose its soul, basically.
Yeah, it's because we're all about money. We're all about greed. We're all about just keep milking it until we're officially not going to make more money off of this. When it's like, come on, guys, know how to end it on a note where I don't know what it's like. It's a weird thing. It's like I get that it's a business at the same time, though. I guess we need more filmmakers who are willing to say, no, it's done.
Yeah.
Like, we need more Nolans to say, like, I'm not saying Nolan's the best filmmaker, but he's a guy who I feel like sticks by his word on certain things where he's like, no, it's done.
And he made a 3-film franchise with at least The Dark Knight
that people still reflect on, so its impact and power still holds up.
Well, and that's the thing too, is especially with movies, I feel like finality makes impacts bigger, because if you can always rely on something always being there, always giving you a new installment every couple of years, the tension starts to drop. And for some movies, for some franchises, that is appropriate, but for others, it's kind of crucial to not lose that.
Yeah. I mean, the Nolan name now is more powerful than ever because he made a finite trilogy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, he has his Inception, he has his Interstellar, but we all really know that. Like, I feel like if he just did the Dark Knight trilogy and Inception, we'd have like this Nolan brand that we have now.
Yeah.
But most of it is really linked to the Dark Knight trilogy. And because that was finite,
Yeah, it gets to have its own impact, and you get to actually sit and reflect on it, and it gets to age over time instead of being kind of constantly kept alive and recontextualized, which, again, can work, but I don't know. I feel like we value things more from that perspective, and I feel like you can tell a much more complete story that doesn't have to pull punches.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing about long-running franchises, and we see that like Marvel has done a great job at this thus far, at least figuring out how we can keep a franchise ostensibly going for 10 years and for the most part maintaining a baseline level of quality. But
well, the reason Marvel can keep its franchise going is because of its diversity of focusing on which characters per movie. Like if they were all Iron Man movies, it'd be like stop. No more Iron Man. we would be at that point. Like, I'm sick of Iron Man movies. We've gotten 21 Iron Man movies.
Yeah.
But because they're able to switch it up with a different focus on it, but most franchises, the Marvel franchise is unique like that, and the DC franchise is unique like that. Basically, the comic book franchises are unique in that capacity because there's franchises within franchises there.
Yeah. So you can circumvent some of the things that maybe are kind of the same every time.
Yeah.
And
I think that's why people are trying to do more universe building, like the Hobbs and Shaw is part of the Fast and the Furious universe. I'm just kind of sick of the word universe being thrown around.
Very sick.
No.
'Cause that's the other thing too, is not everything needs to be subject to what is popular right at this minute. I feel like there needs to be I feel like the answer to this question ultimately is a case by case one, and I feel like we need to apply that to just the way we make movies in general, because I feel like so many things that have the potential to be popular automatically get kind of auditioned and plugged into, like, how can we make this a franchise and keep it running forever and ever and ever, instead of going, what is this, what does it need to be, and what do people want it to be?
Yeah. Like what they did with Halloween recently, just making the right number 2 for for people is unique. Simultaneously, though, I'm like, if you were to tell me you're making 3 more of these, I'd be like, whoa, what?
Well, calm down.
No, maybe 1 or 2 more, but we don't need like a bunch more of these,
Yeah,
and I feel like we might do that, because of the massive hit that this last one was.
Well, that's the troublesome thing too, is that so many films come out and they're like, this is the last one, and so obviously more people go see it, and then they're like, well, now it can't be.
Especially with horror, though.
Yeah, because now we made money, and the horror franchises can be a great sort of indicator for what happens here, because you have a lot of films with an iconic first couple installments that then kind of devolve over time into a template of sort of self-referential parody.
Yes.
And it's hard to avoid that, I feel like, with a lot of long-running franchises, because you either, get self-referential and use the humor to carry you, or you just keep doing the same thing a lot.
Yeah.
Or, I wish we would embrace a certain level of change. That's why I keep waiting for superhero movies to really start jumping deep into the Elseworlds type of stuff, which is what gets me excited for DC coming up, because there's so many ways to expand and do things differently and more strangely.
Sure.
And I feel like we ought to be exploring that, I guess, if we want to keep franchises going, maybe going, okay, we've seen it this way. How do we see it a different way? Because, like, fan service is a huge thing now. And I feel like there are elements of that can be... I don't love fan service. I like fan respect. It's like when there's a moment in a movie that makes a knowing gesture to something that is important that we all care about, I think that's a good thing. But the way we're sort of just like, I don't know, the fans love this, we have to put it in, is kind of regressive for the art form overall, because I think that there's sometimes when you can change things in a way that is ultimately good for something, even though it's not exactly what you had in mind or wanted right off the bat, and I feel like we're very timid to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. Well, we probably shouldn't. We've probably been the biggest of hypocrites here by talking for so long.
Keeping this thing going.
Not knowing when to end our podcast.
Gotta get a prequel to this podcast.
We should probably end this thing. But, yeah, I mean, what's your guys' take on this? What franchises do you think should just end right now?
And which ones do you think are doing a great job keeping it going?
When I was on Movie Fights a couple times ago, I was up against Mark and Draco and Clark Wolf, and the question one of the questions we had was which horror franchise should end, and they said The Purge and Scream, and I said Texas Chainsaw. And to this day, I still stand by that answer, and I feel like everyone else does too.
Yeah.
I
feel like there are still things you could do with both the Purge.
I'm surprised I haven't brought that up.
Yeah.
Because those movies lend themselves to further exploration. Scream Show has proven it. The Purge world proves it.
Well, because they're reacting to things that are happening.
Whereas
continuously.
Texas, like if a movie's a great one-off, there's a reason why.
Yeah. And you might get a decent sequel out of it. Like, I like Texas Chainsaw 2, but after that, you're like,
nah.
Wow. Did we need to do all this? Not that I'm complaining, but...
Well, you guys can subscribe to the Reject Nation. Click that notification bell. And check out Michael B's Patreon, YouTube channel, Omni One Media. Thank you guys.